Welcome, everybody, to Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor's Touch of Torah with Rabbi Barry Silver. It is January 4th, 2022. Happy New Year to all and Shalom. And we are going to be discussing the second book of the Torah, Exodus, and the parsha is Bo. Take it away, Rabbi Barry.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for organizing this and for your technical expertise, which allows us to share the Torah with people all over the world, potentially. And I know that you're recording this so that one day people can listen to this at their leisure. We do have a very interesting passage this week. We're reading, as you say, Bo. Bo means literally to come. Bo in Hebrew, sometimes they say Bo hena, come over here. It also has an English meaning bo, which is to tie a bow, and in French, beau, it means good. It also means a boyfriend, and it means good weather, like il fait beau aujourd'hui. So beau has many meanings, but in this context, it's taken from the first line of the Sedra. The Sedra, or the parsha, is named after the first significant word in the parsha, in the section. And that is Vayidaber Adonai Moshe. God said to Moses, Bo, which literally means come, but what he's saying is go to Pharaoh. And in this passage, Moses returns to Pharaoh for the ultimate 3 plagues, which are very, very devastating upon Egypt and spell the doom of Egypt. In this story, there are the 3 plagues of darkness and locusts, which also causes darkness because they cover the skies, and then the death of the firstborn. And that final one was the plague that convinced Pharaoh to finally let the Jewish people go. Before I get into the details of the passage, I'm going to share with you a method of Torah interpretation, which is a little bit complicated, so bear with me, but I'll go through it slowly. And it's a method of understanding the Torah that has been taught for centuries in Orthodox circles. And I will bring it now into our analysis as well. The method of analysis, which I have shared before on occasion, is called pardes. Pardes is the Hebrew word from which we get the English word paradise. Pardes literally means an orchard, which gives you some idea of our ancestors and what they believed paradise would be like. They believed it would be a place with lots of trees, with nature. And paradise is found in nature, and therefore you could say that our species is slowly and gradually, inexorably destroying paradise as we speak. But this word, pardes, meaning paradise, is an acronym. Pardes is spelled with 4 Hebrew letters, Pe, Resh, Daled, and Samach. The Pe in Pardes stands for Pshat. Pshat means simple, or if you want to keep the acronym going, the Pe could stand for plain, the plain meaning of the words. So you read the passage and you understand it by the plain meaning of the words. The Resh in Pardes stands for Remes. Remes is a hint, or if you want to use the English, you could say a reminder, for resh, reminder. What that means is that the passage is not just talking about something at face value, but it's hinting at something else, something greater than what's actually being described. The next letter in Pardes is the Daled, Pardes. The Daled stands for Drush. Drush means a sermon, If you want to put it into English letters again, you can say the didactic meaning behind the passage. In other words, what lesson do we learn from reading this passage? And the samach in Pardes, the samach stands for a Hebrew word, sod. Sod, and if you want to use the English word that starts with S, is secret. And sod does mean secret. And I would suggest that sod, or the S, also stands for science, because science was unknown to our ancestors. And so it was a secret, which is now being revealed as we start learning the mysteries and uncover these discoveries of science. So Pardes gives you the plain meaning, the reference, or it's a hint at something, the sermonic value, and the secret meaning of the passage. What is it then that, how would we use that type of interpretation to understand Bo? Well, let's look at the plain meaning. The plain meaning is ordinarily thought of as a story that keeps people interested. You read the story, you're interested, the children pay attention because it's a lot of action going on. So what's the plain meaning of it? You got these plagues. God is orchestrating plagues, and he's convincing Egypt to finally let the people go. That's the plain meaning of the Torah. Many people don't accept that this plain meaning is accurate or actually occurred. It's just a way of getting people interested in reading the passage. They believe that it's pointing to something deeper and should not be interpreted literally. Even among the Orthodox, some of them take that position, that it wasn't meant to be taken at face value. And we've done dialogues with Orthodox rabbis, and sometimes you'll hear them indicate that. So the plain meaning is God sent down plagues and liberated the people. The hint, the reminder, could be thought of as follows. What happened in Egypt is a reminder or a hint of what's going to keep happening throughout Jewish history. You have a tyrant or a dictator who is benefited by the Jewish people. Joseph helped Egypt, and he saved Egypt. And then a new leader came in power who the Bible says knew not Joseph. He forgot about the contributions of the Jews. So the Jews have made many nations into great nations with their skill, their expertise, their knowledge, their loyalty and devotion. And then when they started prospering, the leadership and the people turned against the Jews and enslaved them or persecuted them. And then that country always suffered. It always suffered many plagues. As the Torah says, those who bless the Jews are blessed, and those who curse the Jews are cursed. And that's what happened to Egypt. Egypt blessed Joseph and prospered, and then cursed the Jews and enslaved them, and then suffered all these plagues. So that's a reminder or a hint at what's going to happen throughout history. Next, you have Drush, the sermon or the didactic. What is the lesson that we learn from reading this story? The Torah says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, and it doesn't seem to make sense. Why would God intentionally harden Pharaoh's heart so that he would incur all these terrible catastrophes and plagues upon Egypt? It doesn't sound fair. So God's going to punish the entire land of Egypt because of something that Pharaoh's doing beyond his control, that God is making happen. God's hardening his heart, making Pharaoh refuse to release the people, and then punishing all the people of Egypt because of something that God's orchestrating against Pharaoh's will. So that doesn't seem to make sense. But what can we learn from this? We learn that some people are just so mean and vicious and cruel that it seems like there's no way that anybody could be that cruel to other people and that blind. After a while, after 9 plagues, you would think that Pharaoh would get the message and realize this is not a good idea to keep the Jews enslaved and to persecute them. You would think he would know that. But there are people who are so consumed with hate and nastiness and cruelty that it gets the better of them and they do things to harm other people, but they end up harming themselves. This being all consumed with hate not only harms the other person, it ultimately comes back to harm the hater. And that's really what the Torah is trying to tell us. There's some other messages too that you could discern from this. The Jewish people at first didn't want to be led out of Egypt. Moses was talking to Pharaoh, and the Jewish people said, "Stop doing that. You're just going to make matters worse. Don't complain." They wanted to stay enslaved because they were scared about what could happen next. And many of us would rather stay in a rut than deal with the unknown and try to get out of that rut, because we'd rather stay in the rut of what we're used to than face an uncertain future. And therefore we stay enslaved and never grow. The other meaning of this, the sod, or the secret meaning, or the meaning that is revealed by science, is kind of interesting, that today we also have many plagues that we bring upon ourselves. The plague of gun violence, the plague of religious fanaticism, which comes from taking the Bible literally and not using reason and common sense to understand religion. The plague of climate change, which comes from denying science and treating the earth like a commodity. Pharaoh treated people, the planet, like a commodity, and therefore the planet turned against him. And we're doing the same thing today. And so we're suffering the plagues of a planet reacting against us because we're treating it improperly and we're not following the rules of the laws of nature. In the Torah, God punished Egypt. And in modern terms, science tells us that the physical laws, not a supreme lawgiver, but the physical laws of nature are punishing us because we're ignoring these laws and we're acting as if we're above them. And this is the secret meaning that our ancestors couldn't possibly have figured out. But today, we do understand what's going on. And so treating the planet or its inhabitants as commodities is going to bring about great catastrophe. The question is, when we read this passage, will we learn from it and change our ways? Or will we just see the simple, the pashat? Oh, that's a nice story. God saved the Jewish people by bringing plagues on Egypt. It happened a long time ago and doesn't have anything to do with what's going on today. Hopefully, we will look beyond the simple reason and the simple meaning and go beyond that to the remes, the drush, and the sod, the secret meaning, the science meaning, to get value out of this passage. And that's all I have to say about the passage for now. And I will open it up to any questions or comments about what I've said, or and then afterwards we can talk a little bit about what's going on in the world today. Anybody would like to participate? Okay, then would anybody like to share anything about current events, what's going on in the world, or what's going on in your life, or the life of L'Dor Va-Dor? Anybody have anything they'd like to share? Valerie, go right ahead.
Well, I mean, you can interpret things any way that you want to interpret things and put a slant on anything that you want to. What I'm reading into what you're saying, if you carry it into current modern days, we are becoming enslaved. We are enslaved to China because they handle all of our medicines. Other countries handle all of our resources, all of our manufacturing, all of a lot of commodities, a lot of our food. And I think that our leaders are enslaving us into other countries. And I think if we follow down this path, that we, America, is going to be the enslaved people, just like Hebrews were enslaved to Egypt. That's how I interpret this. And nobody is going to change my mind because I see from my perspective what's going on. And that's how I interpret it.
Well, Valerie, you are 100% correct in that each person can take this method of biblical interpretation called this, and they will draw their own lessons from it, their own moral lessons, their own lessons about what is this hinting at, what is this getting at. And certainly your interpretation is 100% valid, and I would agree with it completely. I do agree. And And the Jews eventually willingly subjected themselves to enslavement because they were starving. And they went into Egypt and then they became slaves. And you could say the same thing is true today, that America is consciously and willingly enslaving ourselves to other powers, to China, to dependence on foreign oil, to ways of thinking that are harmful to us. Instead of being free to think rationally, we're enslaved by many different ideas that are very harmful to us. So I agree with your interpretation completely. And that's the beauty of this Paldes. It allows each person to come up with different interpretations and to discuss them and to see which ones seem valid and which don't. As far as I'm concerned, I really like your interpretation, and I agree with it. I'll give you another lesson that we could learn. The plagues afflicted the Egyptians, but the Jewish people were immune. Now, according to the Torah, they were immune because the Jewish people followed God's laws, and God said to sprinkle some blood on their doorposts, and God passed over them. There's another way of looking at this. You could say it's the secret message or the didactic message, the sermon that you could get from this. And that would be to suggest that the world has been plagued by many diseases of ignorance, of arrogance, of indolence, and intolerance. The Jewish people have remained immune to many of these plagues that afflict humanity. We somehow stayed above many of them. We believe in education and learning and knowledge, and we happen to be among the best educated people in the world. So we have seen to immunize ourselves, or vaccinated, to use the vernacular of today, ourselves against ignorance. Not all Jews. Many Jews remain in ignorance, but quite a few have. Then there's also the plague of intolerance, in which we have a dislike for the unlike. Many Jews who practice Judaism and learn from the Torah that we're all one family do not practice intolerance towards other people. At our synagogue, we engage in interfaith relations and we welcome activities and interactions with others. And so many of the Jewish people have remained vaccinated or inoculated from that plague. There have been many other plagues, such as the Black Plague and physical plagues, that the Jews also didn't succumb to, as others did, because of our hygiene, because we have a clean mind and a clean body, and we cleanse ourselves. And so the Jewish people have not succumbed to plagues as readily as others. This has sometimes been used against us by our enemies, who said, aha, the Jews must have caused that plague because everybody else is dying from it and they're not. A very harsh reality the Jews have faced. So this is another lesson that we could learn, that it's not that God, a supernatural being, has chosen to pass over us. It's that we cling to ideals and values that have immunized us to some extent. And the more we immerse ourselves in those values, and the more we vaccinate ourselves, and the more we accept a booster every week on Shabbat, the better able we are to remain immunized from these plagues of humanity. Anybody else want to share some thoughts about this or anything else? In that case, I will share with you something that I'm excited about, an idea that I had. My father used to have a program decades ago called Parson to Parson. He would find another minister that he co-hosted with, and he and this other minister would then invite guests, and they would talk about issues of the day, maybe the particular Torah passage or religious issues, and they would have a discussion across denominational lines and invite others to be guests and to join with them. I am very interested in resurrecting Parson to Parson. I have a couple of candidates that I think would be interested in doing that, and they would be interesting guests. And I'm going to try hard to resurrect this wonderful interaction, interfaith dialogue that my father launched decades ago in honor of his memory, and to keep in the tradition of L'Dor Va-Dor, generation to generation. Another thing my dad used to do, he had a newspaper column called The Silver Lining, in which he would put his positive spin on what's going on in the world. I'm also going to try to resurrect that, either in a message from the rabbi each week, which could be called The Silver Lining, or perhaps, or in addition, a podcast in which I'll share on a weekly basis or maybe monthly basis some of my observations in order to keep alive my dad's memory and also his outreach to the Jewish people and to all people. So I will be working on that in the very near future and sharing that with you. Also very excited about the upcoming Rock and Shabbat that we have on Friday. It's going to be a live Zoom service. I think it's also going to be on Facebook or YouTube, but that's a little bit beyond my understanding. So Sharon could tell you better about that, but I can tell you that it's going to be a really wonderful service. It's going to be very innovative, very upbeat, very positive, high energy, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's not going to be your typical Shabbat celebration. It's going to be a lot of fun, interesting songs, some that you've never heard before. And I'm hoping that everyone will not only join us, but tell your friends, because you're not going to want to miss this. It should be a great service. That's going to be this Friday by Zoom at 7 o'clock. With that, I will turn it over to Sharon, and she can give you more of the details, because she understands the technical side much better than I do.
So yeah, we got a Rock and Shabbat on Zoom, but we're also going to live stream it on YouTube. I'm live streaming this right now, so as another fail-safe to make sure that the test that I did earlier today worked. So this was live streamed directly to YouTube for other people to watch immediately rather than me putting it up after the fact. So I thank you for your participation tonight and for being a part of our Touch of Torah on this January 4th. And I wish you all well. And I hope that you have a great week. And we hope to see you on